Any second now. Hello, everyone. We should be live on YouTube. And only YouTube because Mixer is dead. Hello, everyone. We'll be starting in just a second. Just closing some stuff here and there. Popping out the chats. If you are a Mixer or ex-Mixer listener now listening on YouTube but don't have a Google account, some people tweeted me this week saying, I was listening but I couldn't chat because I don't want to have a Google account. We should create some sort of hashtag on Twitter for you to tweet us. And I'll keep an eye on it. Hashtag, I just find, let's see what hashtag isn't in use. Hashtag WCPod. Hashtag WCPod is not in use right now by the looks of things. Oh no, yes it is. Podcast. That's also in use.
Hashtag Windows Phone lives.
What about WinSendPod? Hashtag WinSendPod is free. So if you want to tweet us at hashtag WinSendPod, I can see your comments there. If you don't have a Google account and can't partake in the YouTube chat, I'll keep that open for the end of the show, of course. All right, I'm ready to go when you are.
Okay. Let's see. All right, I'm now recording.
I am now recording as well.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 186 for July 10th, 2020. Hey everyone, Jan Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about Surface and Windows 10 updates, what's going on there. There was a lot of Microsoft Teams news, and, you know, Teams is one of those things where if you don't really use it, it seems kind of boring, and I totally get that. But some of these updates and announcements this week are super cool, and really goes to show you just how amazing video technology is evolving and how rapidly it is. So we're going to go over that quickly. We'll also talk about the latest on Surface Duo. So we have some internal news regarding that Zach will share, as well as we had a few editorials run on Windows Central this week that weren't even written by us, of other people talking about Surface Duo, one opposing, one for it. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'll briefly mention about the NVX360. It's a new laptop from HP. It's in the mid-range category, and it's basically the best mid-range convertible laptop you can get right now. It's powered by AMD's new processors, and they're pretty good. So I'll talk about that, as well as the XPS 17 is now in our labs. By labs, I mean house, my house. I'll talk about my initial impressions about that device and some, concerns I'm hearing a little bit about it. As well as the XPS 15 is now white. Not a lot to say there, but it is pretty awesome. Also, the Xbox event has been announced. So this is, I believe, coming July 23rd, or is it the 26th?
23rd.
23rd. So this is going to be some news around games, we presume. So we'll talk a little bit about what we're expecting there, as well as taking your questions and comments at the end. Zach, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm not too bad. I've had a busy week doing video. Long videos as well. These video sessions I've done, they've been like over an hour long recording wise, and I've had to cut them down to bite-sized videos because nobody wants to watch an hour, so I have to pick and choose what to put in videos and stuff. But I've been doing loads of video this week, which has been nice because it's been a while since we did much video on the YouTube channel.
Oh, was that a slight hint at me? Is that my fault?
No, not your fault.
Just because I don't have the talent to shoot my own videos. Actually, I probably do. I just don't have the willpower to shoot my own videos. But we'll see how bored I get. Let's get into it for the news this week. So Surface and Windows 10 updates, specifically the May 2020 updates, is still not here for a lot of people. And it's surprising because only last week we did talk about, and there was the news of it, that no, it should be heading out now to Surface devices. And apparently Mary Jo Foley found a slight change in the wording on Microsoft's support page regarding this. And it's because people still aren't getting this update. So there is you can get it if there are no other blockers basically preventing you from getting it. So that's like sort of the mysterious question. It's like, well, what does that actually mean since Microsoft hasn't said? It seems to be, and I haven't verified this myself, but it seems to be that there's been a issue regarding a OneDrive. So people who have OneDrive running in a little taskbar backs up your documents automatically and all that kind of stuff and syncs up. That apparently breaks for some people on the May 2020 updates, which is freaking embarrassing for Microsoft that is an issue. And apparently it's a big enough issue that it's causing a lot of consternation within Microsoft. But from what I understand, that may be one of the blockers for this Surface update. In fact, someone said in comments that if you basically remove OneDrive, you want to install it. And even I don't use OneDrive that much. I'm not one of those. I use it for backup and everything but I don't constantly sync everything back.
Oh, you don't? You don't use OneDrive as your default documents folder?
I do in Word. So Word,
yeah, okay.
I have saves to OneDrive. But like I know Rich Woods from NeoWin, like he puts everything on OneDrive.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I treat
terabytes.
Yeah, I treat my documents folder as my OneDrive folder. So anything that goes in documents just syncs to OneDrive, and that's basically it. Also my pictures do backup in the pictures folder.
Sure.
But like I'm not syncing full ISOs and programs to it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean on my phones, my Android phones, my iPhone, I do use OneDrive camera roll backups. Yeah. All my stuff is stored there. But apparently, if you don't use it or it's not critical to your daily behavior, if you uninstall it, and I believe you can install it later again if you want, the update then goes through. Microsoft hasn't said anything about this, of course, until they fix it. But that seems to be at least one of the things that is preventing users from getting the May 2020 update. Now, there's this bigger question. Is that worth the effort? And I think it depends really if you use OneDrive. I could probably uninstall OneDrive from my computer and not really care. But I know there are a lot of other people who aren't in that same boat. So your best bet is you're going to have to wait until Microsoft comes out with another Patch Tuesday thing to patch a operating system first before it gets fixed.
It's ridiculous because remember, this update has been done since December. Just because it started running out in May doesn't mean it wasn't done before that. Microsoft has been trying to polish up this final build of Windows 10 for 7 months and it's still not ready to go. Why? How has this gotten so bad? Like, I don't understand. This update should have been ready on day one for Surface PCs. It should have been.
Yep. And it does, bring this bigger issue up, which we keep talking about on this podcast, is now with, Panos Panay and his team sort of overseeing the front end of Windows. We're presumably going to get more features and more stuff what we want. We've already seen teasing of that with a new start menu and some updates to the UI there. But, if they can't figure out some of this basic stuff for quality control, like making sure OneDrive doesn't break, it doesn't bode well for this idea of like we should be getting more features. These are solvable problems, but they need to solve them, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of meetings, and hopefully they can figure this stuff out. Because, yeah, in order for Surface to really go forward, Microsoft has to kind of figure this stuff out. We shouldn't be 5 years into this and still having these kind of problems.
Yeah. That said, because I usually clean install the major versions of Windows 10 on all of my Surfaces, and doing it that way, there seems to be no issue once you're on the update. I've not had any issues running on my Surface Studio or my Book 3 or my Go 2 because I just clean install. I never do an in-place upgrade using Windows Update because that's usually what causes the issues. It's doing the upgrade from the old version to the new version. Something doesn't carry over, or something from the old version that has carried over doesn't work well with the newer version. If you just clean install, none of that, you don't get those problems. So the update, at least on its own, works fine. But when it comes to doing actual updates from an old version to a new version, that's where the issues seem to be arising. So if you're somebody who's waiting for the latest update and you don't want to wait anymore, just do a clean install. If you have the time, of course. Doing a clean install can be annoying if you have a million programs to install after the fact. But I think it's worth it.
Someone's asking, Apple gets updates out on day one with significant changelogs too. How can Microsoft not manage this for Surface devices? The answer is actually simple. It's not satisfactory, but it's simple, which is the Surface team up until now doesn't do Windows 10. They're not involved with
Yeah.
the actual OS development, the testing direct. I'm sure they do testing, but they're not playing a direct role in the operating system. Apple Apple is its own customer. So everything it does is in-house. And so they control the hardware, the whole stack, all the drivers. Heck, they even control the CPU most of the time. So because of that control and that vertical, they're able to have a better experience. But this is something that's been changing within Microsoft. You know, those groups have been working more closely together now that the Surface team is more involved with Windows 10. We should see benefits to that to solve these problems. That stuff takes time, right? Panos was just basically announced in this position, I believe, in March. Like, that's not enough time to be like, oh, you know, he's going to step in and solve these problems. This will take at least, I imagine, a year before we start to see like major changes to how things go forward and improve. But that's the reason. Like I said, it's not a satisfactory reason. This is the problem when you have a large company that has silos and you have program managers and they operate sort of independently.
I really do think that we are going to see Microsoft go back to one major update a year next year. I just have a feeling that's going to happen now that Panos is in charge, and obviously the quality control issues they're having. To help fix that, scaling back to one major update is a good idea, because that means they can cancel the spring update for next year, or just not do one, and then do a fall update next year. That gives them over a year to develop the next version of Windows 10 and polish it, like really properly make it good for day one launch. I would be surprised if we see two major updates next year.
Yeah, and you know, I think at this rate, you know, most of us are more interested in 10x anyway. I want to see UI changes come to Windows 10. Don't get me wrong, that's nice. But as a desktop operating system that I use every day, for me, there's nothing fundamentally broken with it or something I really want. I'm more interested at this point in what I think the Surface team is mostly interested in, which is new hardware experiences driven by an operating system that sort of matches that. And that's the promise of 10x, at least. So we'll have to wait to see if that happens. But yeah, you know, Microsoft still has a lot of challenges here. Someone's asking, did this update is what took down my HP Omen, my desktop, which I'm still using? No, it wasn't the actual update itself. I'd already been running on the May 2020 update. This seems to be something with the AV, the Windows Defender and HP, and there was something between the two that caused that. And it was independent of getting a major update. I'm not sure the exact details on it, but it seems to be that. And, you know, related to that, HP reached out to me, and we'll talk about the NVX 360 in a little bit, but that laptop, apparently, when it gets the May 2020 update, sometimes the microphone breaks, the driver breaks, and it has something to do with the driver not being pushed out through Windows Update. And HP was like, we don't know why, but if that happens, go into the device manager and you can manually update the driver and it'll be fixed. But I'm sure HP is not thrilled with that kind of experience either. So this stuff is like, I mean, on one hand, I feel bad for Microsoft because their challenge is they have to make an operating system that runs on radically different hardware, whether it's AMD, it's Intel, or it's going to be even Qualcomm. Then they have to work on hardware that's 10 years old, work in enterprise. Like, there's just so many variables. It is kind of insane that there is, and it's gotten better, but there's a lot of stuff they have to control for. And it's the problem I've said before, that Apple just does not face. And there's pros and cons. You know, Apple, you can argue, gets the better experience. The downside, Apple's less than 10% of the market share for PCs. Always has been, probably always will be, right? It just, if you go look at Apple's market share for PC, it hasn't shifted in a decade. It's just been riding steady. They have a lock-in audience, basically. So Microsoft, on the other hand, gets enterprise, they get government contracts, they get schools, and they have a lot of consumers out there who are still buying PCs. So there's pros and cons to each way, but that's what it comes down to.
That's all true, but that doesn't excuse Surface not getting the update on day one, because Microsoft's own hardware should at least get it on day one. Come on now.
Yeah, and that's the internal organization that just needs to work more closely together.
Hopefully that'll improve in the next year.
Yep. Someone says Microsoft spies on you. No. I don't know. I find it funny in a world where people use TikTok and
Yeah.
Facebook and Google products. And um, listen, if you're doing criminal activity, I don't advise using Windows. I'm
Yeah, but
also not here to,
those people already knew that, so there's no reason. That's
right?
not news.
Yeah, and I'm not really here to argue for those people. Like, oh, you want to download illegal stuff? Like, no, like, what are you doing on your computer and then there's also a bigger question. If you're not doing anything illegal, what makes your life so interesting that someone wants to spy on you? Because most people don't live very exciting lives. Sorry. Uh, I don't live an exciting life. I'm not really worried about people spying on me. Um, anyway, that's it. So we'll follow this stuff with Windows 10, but it's kind of a mess right now. The good news is if you're not getting the May 2020 update, you're missing a ton. So
Yeah,
I think most of us struggle to name a really cool feature that, you
yep.
get. And so not that big of a deal, which is nice. That said, I am on iOS 14 beta
Oh,
on
you
my
are
iPhone.
nice. How are
I
you
did
enjoying it?
try that out. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The animations, they've changed them a little bit, I think, and it's pretty fast. Like it
Mm.
feels faster, seems faster. Um, we got the widget things. It's still confusing. Like I don't find super everything intuitive. The new Siri experience is interesting. It doesn't take up the full screen, kind of looks better. But there's still stuff I don't know how to do, and I'm figuring out the widget stuff and how to do the pages. It's not simple, or at least it's not obvious to me. There's also this thing you can finally now set your default browser and email app, which
Mm.
is cool. I don't know how to do that.
I don't think
So
it's in the betas yet. That's
yeah,
why I
that's
think it's
why I
coming
think
later.
too.
Yeah.
Right. So, but that's something to look forward to. But I mean, it feels pretty nice so far. So my iPhone is my secondary phone, so I don't really care about stability, but it is in beta 2 now. But that is Apple for you. All right, let's talk a little bit about Microsoft Teams. So there was normally we would have had bigger events with the summer, but obviously with the pandemic and all that, Microsoft has had to rely on doing these kind of virtual things. But Microsoft Teams had some big announcements this week, and I believe there's four of them.
Hmm.
So let's talk about them in order. So there's one, what's it called now? More together, now together,
Together mode.
together mode. This is super clever. So what makes these updates interesting is clearly these are rapid reactions to this changing world where video conferencing and meeting is becoming a day-to-day thing, not just something companies may need on occasion, but because everybody's doing work from home and schools. So what this feature does, instead of having, up until this week, the argument was like a grid of everybody's web camera, and you would have six, and then people are like, we need more, and it was like, all right, there's nine, and then it's like, we need more, and it's like 30, and there's obviously a limit to you eventually just have a tiles of people, right? And it's just like this massive grid. And we face this problem even with Google Hangouts and stuff like that, right? Microsoft kind of got around this problem by doing something very clever, which is they got rid of everybody's little tile, and this is optional, of course. You don't need to use this feature, but they got rid of everybody's little square. And what it does is it creates a classroom. Like if you were a professor looking at a classroom, and it digitally inserts people's heads into little seats. And you can see everybody sitting together. And it's freaking wild looking. Like when you check it out, it's it looks a little corny, but it's it does give a more nuanced feel. Like you're almost presenting to a group of people. And so I don't know all the details about how this is going to work and stuff like that, but the amount of processing that needs to happen in real time to make that happen is insane to me. Like the fact that they're already kind of doing that stuff. But I think for teachers who are teaching kids, it's going to be a really interesting thing, especially for other students who will also see the other students sort of sitting down like they were in classroom. And it's going to be these little things I think that does improve this experience of that unfortunately a lot of us have to do of working from home. I think it's a super clever idea that just really leapfrogs this idea of like just a grid of icons. Um, Next thing is Cortana. So Cortana is still around. We've been saying this forever that Microsoft is treating Cortana as like your digital assistant, but they're putting it into specific products, specifically around productivity in Office, because they are part of the Office team. So they're putting it into the team's mobile apps. And Cortana will basically be able to assist you getting meetings, calling people, setting things up, and doing what you would expect a digital assistant to do. We'll have to wait to see how it's implemented and stuff like that. But this is kind of, again, getting back to the realistic approach of what Cortana should be in sort of Microsoft's products. It's not going to be Siri because they don't have a Windows Phone anymore. So by putting Cortana into all their major apps, I actually think it's kind of clever. What were the other two things, Zach? There's one was a
other
limits.
two things was so they're adding some like more personalization things to the program and apps itself. So live reactions and chat bubbles and stuff, just to give the UI and just communicating with people a little more of a personal touch, because it can feel very clinical using these programs sometimes.
Sure.
So it's nice to have like these chat bubbles and friendly user interfaces when communicating with colleagues and whatnot. And then there's also they're increasing the size of participants in interactive meetings to up to 1,000 people. Now, I don't think you'll be able to see all 1,000 people on screen at the same time, but the image they've used, there's a good 30 of them on screen. So it's like you can get a lot of people on screen, which is incredible.
Again, that's insane. 1,000 people, and that's interactive, meaning those people can participate in a meeting. Like, that is crazy amount of traffic and numbers and cloud computing required to make that happen. But that's not even like the end of it, right? You can go up to, is it 20,000 for non-interactive?
Oh, that's right. View-only presentations will also soon support up to 20,000 viewers and teams, which makes sense because not all 20,000 people will have a webcam. People are just watching at that point, just like a live stream, more or less. But 1,000 participants for webcam is incredible.
That is, and 20,000 non is also. I wonder how they tested that.
Probably doing an all-hands meeting in the last few months at Microsoft, I assume.
Yeah, had that not leak out, though. 20,000 people, no one mentioned anything. But that is a feat of cloud computing. That's Azure, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that is all that stuff. Real-time effects. Even like what I've gone on a lot about RTX voice, which I'm using here, which in real time filters out background noise. So if my little kitty here starts meowing, you won't hear it. Like, we're getting to this point now where we can do this kind of real time effects. And you see this every day in your life, whether it's Snapchat and those live filters, which you can actually use on Windows now too, which is kind of insane. But this idea of like live filters is also mind blowing to me that we're kind of doing that. It's an interesting age of computing where we're getting to. So I think it's kind of neat to see this stuff. But
so most of this is coming later this year. Some of it's launching in August. Others is just more general later this year. And it's looking good. Microsoft Teams is one of the biggest products at Microsoft right now, and one of the most successful, I think. This pandemic has really been nothing but good news for Microsoft Teams, which I guess is good for the Teams team.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll hear more. I know everybody's wondering about the consumer version of Teams, but the summer is still going here, and I do expect we'll hear more in the next coming weeks and months. Maybe even it might even make sense that they may hold us till October, which the tradition is Microsoft announces updates to its Surface products.
That's true.
And so they may do a co-launch then of Teams for consumers, which they've already announced, but said was coming later this year. So that may make more sense then. We're still waiting on some other technologies too. There was this, when Surface Pro X was announced, they showed how in Skype, they were going to be able to do this thing because of the processor in the Pro X. There's like a dedicated AI chip there or something. It was going to be able to adjust your eyes in real time so that, like right now, I'm like looking at the web camera. People get mad if I'm looking at Zach on my screen, my eyes don't match up with the camera, and that makes people mad apparently. So like one way to solve that is, well, you could put the camera behind the display, right? But we're not there yet. But what they're doing is some sort of real-time processing, which it will basically take my eyes and adjust them up to face the camera, which is, I imagine there's a lot of challenges there to make that realistic looking, but we're still waiting on that feature to happen. It hasn't come out yet, and there's really been no word on it. But stuff like that, I think, is going to be really transformative. Like, I think it's going to really kind of change the whole experience of like how we use these devices. And it's really clever. It's not something I feel like if we watch Blade Runner, right? I always love going back to watching old sci-fi movies to see what they got right and what they predicted. I don't think anyone predicted that computers would get to the point where they use real-time processing to fix real-world problems and how we use this technology. And it's just amazing that we're getting to this point where we can do that. Because before you needed like huge servers locally to do that processing, and you couldn't do it in real time. But here we are, so should be fun.
Indeed.
All right, you want to do Surface Duo, since people love talking about Surface Duo?
Let's talk about Surface Duo. Lots of people have been asking for us to talk about Duo these last couple of weeks. Not much has really changed since we last talked about it, except this week a lot changed. So let's start at the very top. Let's talk about the sort of acquisition. So on Monday, I think it was, or late or the weekend, earlier this week, news broke that Microsoft had acquired a number of employees from a company called Movil. This company specialized in Android OS development and services and user experience design and all of that stuff, but primarily all of that stuff featured on Android mobile experiences. I believe I've mentioned this on the podcast a couple of times, but Microsoft actually wasn't working on the Surface Duo's OS, not directly. They were working with Movil on this stuff, because when Microsoft decided to drop Windows for Android on the Surface Duo, they didn't immediately have a team ready to just bring all of their visions to life running Android. They don't just have a team sitting on standby that can just begin working on Android OS. They had to hire that people at these vendor companies to get that work going. And this week, Microsoft finally brought those people in-house. So now all of those people who have been working on the version of Android that will ship on Surface Duo, those people are now Microsoft employees, and they're based in, I think it's Romania, Taiwan, and the United States. So that all this really does is it formalizes what they've been doing already. Microsoft has been working closely with this company since the beginning. It's not like they said, hey, make us a version of Android and we'll build a device around it. They went, this is the device we've got. We want this, and this. Can you deliver that? And Movil said, yes. Now what they're doing is bringing those people on board, and they're now Microsoft employees. And these people, this team, this Microsoft Android team, whatever they're called, I believe they're under the Microsoft Devices team. They will be the team that handles post-launch updates for Surface Duo, including app updates and OS updates, as well as the version of Android that will eventually ship on Surface Duo 2, which I assume will be sometime later in 2021. This does nothing but solidify Microsoft's commitment to the Surface Duo. I saw a lot of people take this news as bad news, like Microsoft wasn't working on the OS. That's not good. That obviously shows that Microsoft doesn't care. When in reality, it shows that Microsoft does care. Microsoft, at the time in which it switched to running Android, didn't have the expertise to deliver what it wanted with Android. So they hired out to experts who could deliver their goals. If Microsoft didn't care, they wouldn't have done that. They was just, well, we can do this now. Let's just do the bare minimum and ship it. They decided to hire out.
I can see them. They're sitting in like their offices, and someone pulls out like an Android for Dummies book. Like, it says here, we got to plug this in, and they're like, someone's reading out the instructions like it's an IKEA product. Yeah,
and I'm not saying Microsoft didn't have people at Microsoft who couldn't do that stuff. I'm sure that they've got loads of experts who could have done that. The problem is they didn't have a dedicated team for that. All of those people at Microsoft who could have delivered this product were busy doing other stuff. They've got jobs. They can't just be pulled off what they're doing to do this. So Microsoft had to hire out externally, and now they brought them in house. They're now Microsoft employees. It's all the same thing at the end of the day. They're now working on this in-house, and it's good news for Surface Duo. But yeah, the whole people saying this is bad news for Duo doesn't make any sense to me. If anything, this just confirms Microsoft is committed to the Surface Duo and wants to make it the best it can possibly be. So yeah, that's the acquisition news. What else happened in the world of Surface Duo this week? We did a video about the user experience. So we did one back when the first emulator launched, and the reason I did another one is because the emulator has actually come quite far since, I think it was February when that emulator first came out, maybe even January. In the January emulator, animations weren't working. It was very bare bones. Stuff wasn't finished. In the latest emulator, I believe it's based on the version of the OS that will actually be shipping on hardware, except scaled back. So the emulator, for those who don't know, the emulator isn't a snapshot of the retail build of Android on Surface Duo. It's a scaled back, like bare bones version for developers so that they can dive into the OS and test their own apps. So it means it doesn't have any features on all that stuff. But if you hack around it and pull apps from external sources and do a little bit of magic, you can actually make it look and feel like a retail unit, which is what I did. It took me forever. It's been weeks, but I finally got it working. And I did a video on it, and lots of people are looking at that, and they're actually way more excited about the Duo now because they finally get to see how the experience works, how moving apps around the screens behaves, how the Microsoft Launcher interacts with the two screens, how different Microsoft apps flow and adapt to the spanning, and how non-Microsoft apps don't. So at launch, and I believe this will be the case on the retail unit, if you try to span a non-Microsoft app, or at least, sorry, let me rephrase that. If you try to span an app that doesn't support spanning, you can still do it, but the app just won't flow around the bezels, so you have content cutting through the bezel and stuff. So for example, I use Spotify in the video. I span Spotify, and along the bottom of Spotify there are three buttons. There's home, search, and my library, or whatever it is, and the search button gets covered up by the bezel because what Spotify thinks has happened is it's just pane has expanded, not that there's two screens involved. So a lot of things hide behind the bezel. But developers can update their apps to take advantage of the dual screen so that the UI elements shift around the bezel. We demo it with Outlook, with OneNote, Microsoft Edge, and a couple more as well, including some I didn't demo. I think Microsoft News is getting a big update for Surface Duo, which will have things like book reading mode and whatnot. So Microsoft,
which looks really cool, by the way.
Yeah, so Microsoft's own first-party apps will support spanning. That makes sense. All of Microsoft's inbox Surface Duo apps will support spanning. I believe that there will be some Google apps pre-installed, but I don't know if all of them will support spanning. We'll have to wait and see on that. I would be surprised, but then again, if Microsoft is working closely with Google, maybe they've come to some sort of arrangement that shows off Google apps in span mode.
Yeah, so that doesn't work for the SMS app, right?
Yeah, right. So right now, it's a great example. So the SMS app on Surface Duo is Google Messages, and at least as far as I'm aware, it doesn't support spanning. You can span it, but there's no dedicated UI, so things just cut across both screens, and there's no...
Because you would imagine, it would be on the left side, would show the list of your messages, and then you click one, and on the right side, it would show the open message conversation. But that doesn't exist. Yeah,
at least not yet. Hopefully again, we're still a month or two away from the Duo possibly launching. So that could all change before then. But yeah.
Someone's asking about LinkedIn.
Does LinkedIn support spanning? I don't know. I haven't tried it. I'll tell you what, I'll try it and I'll tweet screenshots if it does. I would be... to be honest, actually, LinkedIn, I believe, is one of the apps that will be pre-installed on Surface Duo, so I guess it will at some point before launch. But I don't know if it does yet, because in the video I just pulled the public apps for the most part. There's a couple of internal apps I got in there as well. But I pulled most of them are public apps that you can just find on APK Mirror, and I just sideloaded them onto the Duo emulator, and they all just work out of the box. So, Microsoft is preparing. I hear next week... is the deadline for all of the inbox apps to have their day one updates ready to go. So the factory OS image for Surface Duo is, I believe that's been compiled and it's been ready to go for a while. The day one updates is what you'll get when you turn the Duo on for the first time. Once you unbox it, it loads up, say, hey, sign in. Once you hit the desktop or the launcher, it'll go, like, we have X amount of updates ready for you to go, and that's what Microsoft is preparing next week, which is another indication that this thing is close to launch. If Microsoft is preparing day one updates this month, why would they be doing that now if the thing's coming out in October, November? We're getting close. A lot of people are starting to doubt that this thing's coming soon, but I think we're pretty near. I think at this point all we're really waiting on is external factors. Like this week there was news that Microsoft is currently getting the version of Android that ships on Surface Duo authenticated with Google's compatibility test something. There's like I think CTA or CTS, I can't remember what it's called, but either way, Microsoft has to talk with Google and say, hey, here's what we've done to Android, is this good to go? And Google says yes or no, and I'm assuming they'll say yes. But not only that, I think we're also waiting for FCC approval, which needs to happen before they can start shipping devices to consumers. But we are getting close. I definitely think it'll be this summer still. I don't know if it'll be before the Galaxy Fold 2 event. I know that was something that we were hearing was going to happen, but I would be surprised if we see the thing launch before then. It might get announced before then, but I don't know if it will launch before August 5th.
Interesting. And plus, we also had two editorials this week on Windows Central. One written by Andrew Martonic from Android Central, basically saying it was critiquing the Surface Duo. Not that it was anything that you and I haven't said. We've been, I think, doing a pretty good job for the last 6 months downplaying or setting people's expectations for this device. I think I wrote an article in December or January saying, don't expect this thing to have a very good camera. And that's fine because in the sense of, I'm not expecting it to have a good camera. What I'm only interested in, though, is the experience of using dual screens. And we saw Frank Shaw, their head PR person, this week, was tweeting out some photos of him making bread, which is one of his hobbies. And his Surface Duo was there on the table. And we saw, now there's the bumper case. We saw Panos with it. Now Frank has it, which goes to show you that this stuff is probably coming along in the late stages. We expect the bumper case will probably in the box. It's just goes around, protects the edges. He was using it. He also had the Surface Pen, the new flat one that's used with the Pro X. And had some writing under the screen. And it was kind of neat to see. The only reason I'm bringing this up, it was neat to see Surface Duo sort of in the wild, in a kind of real situation. Someone's in their kitchen doing following a recipe on it, taking notes, right? And when you see it like that, it does, it's pretty exciting to see, and it reminds you that this really is kind of a different device versus just another phone, And when you see it, you're like, and when we saw some internal apps that they're using that improves experience and basically leverages the dual screen stuff. And when you see what they've done with some of these apps, like the reading mode and all this kind of stuff, it just kind of clicks. It's like, oh, okay, I really get what they're going for here, which is sort of like a small digital book. And they're making their apps to sort of reflect that. And, your video this week was really good at showing how that stuff will work. And when you see it, it is super interesting. It doesn't address or get rid of the criticisms about like no NFC, no Qi, a slightly older processor, a camera that may be okay. Like those problems still definitely exist. And I think a lot of that stuff I'm not concerned about. I think they want to get this device out there. Most of that can be solved with a version 2. Like adding, the thing is when this device was designed, it wasn't made to be an Android phone. It was meant to be basically a version of Windows 10X, but like Andromeda, what was at the time, right? It was a kind of customized operating system. But that was what it was built for. And they've switched now and now it's an Android phone. So that's why these kind of gaps feel more obvious. But I feel like adding Qi, adding NFC, and improving some things for version 2 when you're building from the ground up is kind of solvable, right? Those aren't fundamental problems. Yeah. Camera is a little bit more tricky. I've said it before. Cameras take a long time to get good at. And we've seen companies like LG even struggle to kind of compete against, say, Samsung. And Samsung sank millions, maybe even $1 billion into optics and cameras to get where they are. And Apple, I've said, took a long time before they got good too. Apple's cameras were only acceptable, in my opinion, up until the last few years. In fact, the iPhone 11 for me was the first camera that they did that actually impressed me. Because up until then, you could always make the argument that Windows Phone, back in 2014, had an advantage and was better. And then Android took that mantle, specifically a lot of Samsung devices and Huawei. So this stuff takes time. I don't know if they'll solve those things, but the actual experience of using a dual screen kind of computer, and this brings me to that second editorial that was posted by some gadget guy. That's his name. He's a guest writer, but it was a really good editorial. But he was basically saying that, it's not like Microsoft sought out to make an Android phone. That's not what they were doing. They're making a Surface. It just happens to run Android as the operating system.
And only because their hand was forced.
Right. Yeah. And it's more akin to sort of like how Amazon uses its Fire tablets as a method to deliver their own services and experiences. They didn't make those tablets necessarily to be like, to replace or, it's its own kind of thing. And I think that's was a smart way, I thought, and to think about what Duo is. It's not an Android phone. They're not trying to make an Android phone. And to make that criticism that they should have started with making just a basic Android phone before jumping into Duo misses the point, which is, like I said, they're not trying to do that. They're trying to make their own device. They're trying to make a Surface. That's what this is. It's a Surface. It just happens to run Android, but they're going to still make that experience based on their internal philosophy of how this stuff should run. So,
yeah, and the reason it can make phone calls, I see this comment all the time, is that, well, if they're not marketing it as a phone, why can't it run Windows? Because in that case, if it's not a phone, it doesn't matter if it doesn't have Snapchat stuff. And the answer is, well, because it's small enough to take with you in a pocket. And the idea of, even though it's still a Surface, it's designed to be a Surface that you can use no matter where you are. Whereas with a tablet or a laptop, you kind of have to be in a specific scenario to pull that out and use it. Whereas a phone, it can sit in your pocket. You don't have to put it in a bag. You can carry it wherever you are. You pull it out, but you don't want to carry two things in two pockets. You don't want to carry a phone and then a small Surface. So this thing can replace both of those by adding phone capabilities, which is what Microsoft has done. So although Microsoft isn't advertising it as a phone, it still has that capability for those who need it. But that doesn't mean it's not a Surface. Microsoft is still building this thing as a Surface first and foremost, not an Android phone. Yeah. So I don't think Microsoft itself is going to care too much when it's compared to the likes of the Galaxy Fold, or the latest iPhone or the latest Pixel. Because at least for Duo version 1, it doesn't matter. Duo 2, I think we'll start seeing more of that play for the phone market in Duo 2 and Duo 3. But the first generation Duo, because you've got to remember, this is hardware design that's 3 years old at this point, 2 years old. This thing was supposed to come out in 2018, and it didn't. Microsoft is done with this version of Duo. They've perfected this form factor to a T. It's been so long that this thing is good to go. So they're ready to push that out and actually start innovating on the hard design with version 2.
And that includes, presumably, thinner bezels.
I would hope so.
Which is such an old criticism at this point. I don't even bring it up, only because it's someone brought up on Twitter, oh, but those bezels. I'm like, we've known about this device for we've seen images of it now for what, 10 months, 9 months. For me, it's got big bezels. I've accepted that fact though. To me, that's just an old criticism. I'm more interested though still in the experience of using these apps. So when you see Microsoft's inbox apps in action, like in Zach's video, and some of the ones that haven't even come out yet and that will be coming out, it kind of clicks. It's just a different way to experience digital content. I've said before, I'm not saying this is a success, right? I'm not saying they figured it out, but there's something there. There's interest there. And I think a lot of people do have interest, which is, why Andrew Martonic and the Android Central guys were commenting on it this week and writing these articles. And I think a lot of whatever criticisms there are, I think there'll be interest in a version 2. And I think a lot of those issues that will be made on version 1 will be legitimate. And I think, for a lot of consumers, you'll probably want to hold off. But yeah. I think, and I've said before, I can already tell you kind of the review for Duo, which is, it's a device that'll have an interesting idea. There's some interesting ideas there. It's not executed perfectly, but there's enough there that they should do a version 2 and continue to improve upon. Yeah. And really, I think that's their only goal. I think that is a realistic version 1 attempt here. It's is this, because if I get Duo and putting aside the camera and the NFC, which doesn't bother me too much. I get how it affects other people. For myself, it's not crucial. But if I get it and I'm using these dual screen apps, I'm just this thing is just clunky. It's slow. And I don't find myself benefiting from having 2 screens. Or if that's my review, that's a big problem. Yeah. Because then there's something fundamentally wrong with the
form factor.
The form factor.
Yeah.
I don't think that will be the case, but I am interested in quantifying that. I want to know what it's like does it really change my experience? Because you can argue, and I would, that with Apple products, the iPhone is such a great example of this, where when the iPhone first came out, it had so many drawbacks compared to what was out in the market, specifically Pocket PCs and Trios. And of course, BlackBerry too. Those devices did way more stuff, had apps, had an ecosystem. And the Apple phone didn't do any of that stuff. But what it did focus on, it did very well, which is that kind of core experience. And Apple's figured this out a long time ago that if you just try to do this one thing really well, the rest you can fill out later.
Mm.
And I'll say, the iPhone was like that for a long time, especially specifically the hardware. We used to laugh when we all had our Lumias, like these clowns talking about their camera and like we're doing night mode and all this kind of stuff, the Lumia 920. And remember how everybody was like, cameras don't really matter though. And now it's like now that their cameras are good, it's sort of like, oh, cameras are important again. But Apple knew they need to get the fundamentals right and they could build off of that. And they've done that. The iPhone 11, I've said, and whatever your feelings are on Apple, the iPhone 11 is a really good phone. Like they finally, in my opinion, figured it out. I said the same with Apple Watch. Apple Watch version 1, and that's a really interesting device to compare this to. The Apple Watch conceptually was super interesting. Like you saw it and you're like, damn, that's kind of really pretty looking. And it did stuff that no other kind of wearable at the time did, which to be honest were just glorified pedometers that occasionally would vibrate to tell you like a text message came in. But it wasn't executed right. The vision wasn't, they didn't have the ability to do everything they wanted to in that one. But I said by Series 4 became really good. Mm-hmm. The bezels became thinner, battery life got acceptable, and the software was faster. It ran apps a little bit, and it did in the health stuff. They did health stuff that no one else was doing. And because of that, they finally figured it out. The vision caught up with the original concept. And I feel like that's the same sort of here with Surface Duo, where it won't be a very good version 1, but there'll be enough interest there that for some of us will be like the benefits outweigh those drawbacks. And those drawbacks can be fixed.
Yeah. Now, imagine if this thing was launching with Windows. Not only is the version 1 hardware not great, but then the OS experience and the app selection would be poor as well. And that would kill this thing in the water. So it running Android is really a saving grace because the ecosystem side of it, the app side, is already solved. Like, they have the app. So even if the hardware isn't great, it's not like you can't use the thing. If it was running Windows 10X, the hardware could be the best hardware that's ever existed on this planet. But if I can't run Twitter or Instagram or whatever on it, what is the point in it existing? That's the key difference here. And I think that the comparison with the iPhone is exactly right. The first iPhone, it pushed a new form factor, and that was the thing it was trying to do the most above everything else. It failed in a lot of other areas, but it prevailed overall because of how well it executed that form factor. And I think Duo V1 is trying to do the same. The other thing I'll say is I don't think Microsoft commits to a Surface line if they don't think they can make it to a version 2 or a version 3. I think if they say, right, we're going to make this Surface, this new product line,
right,
but we guarantee that we have to get to at least version 3 before we kill it. We've got to try, listen to user feedback. We've got to figure out what to fix and fix it, and then we'll do a version 2. If there's any more complaints, we'll improve it a little bit more, version 3. And if even then at version 3 that it's just not gelling well with the public and stuff, then I think that's when they decide to kill things. And so far, I don't think we've seen that in any Surface line.
And someone's bringing up in comments, of course, Surface RT and Windows Phone, right? But there's so many caveats there.
Yeah.
First of all, Surface RT was 2012, right?
Yeah.
That also never really caught on. Like there were a couple of devices.
But not only that, the form factor did. It pushed a form factor, and that form factor prevailed and is now the most popular Surface line.
And the ideas behind RT lived on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what Windows 10S eventually became. We have some stuff with Windows 10 on ARM is there as well. They just sort of separated. And Windows 10X borrows a lot from RT. They learned a lot from RT. And listen, it's okay to make products that fail. Like, if a company doesn't make products that fail, they're maybe not taking bold enough risks out there. But I'd also argue that both RT and Windows Phone, that's old Microsoft. That's actually Steve Ballmer, Microsoft.
That's right.
Nadella inherited Windows Phone. He tried to give them enough, he oversaw the Windows 10 mobile launch, but, we said that probably wasn't the best version of Windows Phone that had happened. But since Nadella took over, there hasn't been, like they at least had the, they canceled Surface Mini before that even hit market, right? And at least they
Luckily.
caught themselves. Yeah. But yeah.
Because otherwise, what I just said would be easily shot down. Like, oh yeah, but the Surface Mini came out and they only got one version. It's like, oh yeah,
right.
I guess you're right.
But that's a good example of them catching themselves,
Yeah.
being like, there's something here, but this is not the right time to do this. And we saw that again with Surface Neo, right? So Surface Neo and the whole dual screen push for computing is like that. I feel like they realized the market changed suddenly with this work from home stuff, and what they really need is more of a Google Chrome OS competitor right now, and then they can push the dual stuff a little bit later. And in the meantime, they'll probably continue to improve the dual screen stuff, and they'll learn a lot from Duo and how people use things. But I don't know. I think it's okay to have, like I said, products that fail. It's fine. You need to take risks.
And again, going back to the whole failing thing, like failing isn't a universal standard. Everyone has a different level for what they consider to be a failure. If Microsoft only sells 10,000 Surface Duos, is that a failure? Maybe in the eyes of an iPhone user who, they use an iPhone that sells millions of units every year. But if Microsoft are only forecasting 5,000 sales, they've doubled their expectations. That's a win for Microsoft, and Microsoft makes the product. Therefore, is it a failure? Not to Microsoft. I think for Duo version 1, keeping expectations low. If you're a hardware fanatic, if you're somebody who has to have the latest and greatest hardware, expectations should be low here, because this isn't going to be that device. It's pushing the form factor, and I think with Duo 2 and Duo 3, we will start to see them build out on the other parts, like a better processor, better thinner bezels, all of the other features that you expect in a flagship smartphone, like wireless charging and NFC capabilities. That will be coming later. But for Duo 1, it's for Surface fans who are happy to make those sacrifices, but more importantly, it's for testing out and pushing a form factor that hasn't really existed before. I know there's the LG G8X, whatever it's called, the dual screen phones that have existed before. All of them are rubbish. They're all bad. The Surface Duo may be the first good one, only because this whole product has been built from the ground up as a dual screen phone. Not just the hardware, but the software as well. If you go back and watch my hands-on video of the operating system, it's not like Microsoft just slapped the Microsoft launcher on it and was done.
Right.
They really dedicated time and effort to making the dual screen experience flow. It's really easy to just make Android think it's running on two screens and be done with it. That's essentially what the ZTE Axon M did. You can go and watch reviews of that. Reviewers are like, yeah, but it's just doesn't really. Why? It's just Android on two screens. There's no real flow to it. Whereas
benefit. Yeah.
The Duo, they've really thought about every aspect of how dual screens makes people more productive, how the user experience should flow, because having two screens means that there's a disconnect between one thing and the other thing. But how do we get those things to cross the bezel and stuff? It should be intuitive. You should just be able to pick something out and flick it across. You can do that on Duo. You couldn't do that on the ZTE Axon M. Like, they've really thought about everything from here. And also, I just want to clarify as well that a lot of people saw this Movil news saying, oh wait, so does the Microsoft Launcher and SwiftKey and stuff, was that not developed by Microsoft? The apps does include Launcher and SwiftKey and Edge and Outlook and OneNote, and all of Microsoft's Android apps are built in-house, and they always have been. The Microsoft Launcher on Duo, SwiftKey on Duo, that's always been developed in-house. That was never outsourced to third parties. What was outsourced to third parties was the Android OS stuff specifically, including the firmware and whatnot. That was all outsourced to these third-party vendors like Movil, and who have now been bought in-house at Microsoft. That's the only thing that they were outsourcing, because they didn't have the team internally to work on that stuff, and now they do. So that's good.
Yeah, it's all interesting stuff. We'll have to wait and see when we get to the device to see how good it is, if there's something there. I think there is something there to the concept, but this is more proof of concept, I think, at this point. But I'm excited to try a proof of concept device. I think it's really interesting. Just like HoloLens version 1. You and I both have that device. It's super cool.
I'm sitting in a drawer.
There's something there. Yeah. It's super. I mean, when you're using it, you're like, I could see a future where this is going to be big, right? But it's not here now, right? Yeah. There's no way you and I would tell anyone go buy a HoloLens. But doesn't mean that the idea there is not good. It just, they need to have time to bake it. So we'll see. All right, let's move on to the Xbox event. So this is July 23rd. Zach, what are we expecting at this event? So this is going to be not hardware.
Right.
We're probably not expecting Anaconda, right? That's the
That's Lockhart, you mean? Anaconda's
Lockhart,
the Series X. Yeah, so I don't think we're going to see any console announcements. I mean, they could surprise us, but I don't. I think August is when we'll start hearing more about Lockhart and pricing for the consoles and whatnot, and possibly even release dates for the hardware. So the July 23rd event is expected to be all of Microsoft's first-party game announcements, and by first-party I mean Xbox Game Studios. Microsoft for the last couple of years has been purchasing a bunch of different game studios and filing them under this Xbox Game Studios brand to build games for the Xbox and Windows 10. I think all of the games that launch on Xbox that are exclusives also come to the Windows 10 store as well, and I think they even go to Steam now. Either way, you'll be playing them on a Microsoft product, whether that be Windows or Xbox. And we're expecting to see a whole bunch of announcements from these studios, and including possibly even announcements of a couple of more acquisitions for game studios, which would be interesting to see. But primarily, I think the biggest thing that lots of people are waiting for this event is Halo Infinite. It's been 2 years since Halo Infinite was announced. And we've not yet seen any gameplay for the event. And Microsoft or 343 Industries, who develops Halo Infinite, are promising that yes, this will be where we see our first glimpse at Halo Infinite gameplay, campaign gameplay that is. So that's very exciting. This will be, I think Halo Infinite is going to be the hallmark products, like the flagship game for the Series X. This is going to be what showcases its potential the most, because it's Halo. Halo is the reason why Xbox is still around today. And if Halo isn't delivering the gold, then I don't know what will. We're also, there's rumors that maybe there will be a new Fable announced. A Fable Twitter account was found on Twitter, just at Fable, and it's called Placeholder, and they joined in March 2020. Why is that? Perhaps there's a new Fable on the way, which will be very exciting. I'm sure there'll be some Forza announcements. Apparently, we might be seeing more from Ninja Theory. Psychonauts 2 is still due for 2020. Rare's also unveiled a new Everwild game last November, and we might be getting a closer look at that during this event. And a whole bunch more could be announced as well. So this is going to be the event, I think. I think if you're a gamer on the fence of whether or not you should go for a PS5 or an Xbox Series X, PS5 already had its event. This is the Xbox event. This will be what you can base your decision on going forward.
And we're going to see real gameplay, not just
real. I think yeah. So Microsoft did a gaming event. Yeah, Microsoft did a gaming event back in March, April, whenever it was, earlier this year, and it was third-party games from third-party developers who aren't under the Game Studios brand, and for the most part that event was criticized quite heavily for not showing much gameplay and also not really announcing anything exciting. There was lots of indie games and stuff, no AAA titles apart from Assassin's Creed, I think, and Hitman 3, of course. How dare I forget Hitman 3? But yeah, this event's going to be like, this is going to be the blow your socks of, this is why you should get a Series X event, and I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah, it should be good stuff. I'm still not excited until I can actually get the new console and some games, but I hate following the teasing stuff, but at least we're getting close, so this should be good. And they did the criticisms from that previous events, I'm pretty sure took to heart, because it was pretty public. A lot of people, even Jez wrote an article, Jez Gordon, our games editor, about the expectations versus what happened. So this probably will be a very good event and give what fans want. But yeah, we'll have to kind of wait and see. And yeah, Microsoft's going to continue to buy more studios, which is kind of interesting. Interview this week came out, I think it was with Phil Spencer, basically saying Nadella has given his blessing. They're going to continue to buy studios so long as certain expectations are met and the financials happen, but they're not slowing down.
I assume that's one of the reasons why they killed Mixer, right? Because now they've got all this money that they were sinking into Mixer that can now be sunk into game studios.
and that's what we heard was one of the factors. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, that the Xbox team gets a budget every year. They could do what they want with it, and they could have continued sinking money to Mixer, would have taken a percentage up with no guarantee, or very unlikely it was going to improve things. Or I'm sure Spencer was like, or I could take that money and go buy one or two new studios and get some original IP and give gamers what they actually really want, which is good original content from us. So I think that was probably an easy, if unfortunate, decision that they had to make. But yeah, it's not like with them getting rid of Mixer, there's no upside because they get to now sort of use that money. Just like how without having us having to broadcast to Mixer, I don't need to share the Mixer link. I get more room to tweet information.
That's great.
It's all cascading. Yeah.
Way to bring it home.
Yes. All right, let's move on to the Amazon Prime Video app. So this came out last week, and it was the Italian site who, even though I'm Italian now, I'm not going to be able to pronounce them. I forgot who it was. Anyways, it was one of the Italian Aglamento, or I forgot I pronounced them. I just had them on my Twitter too. Anyway, they've been teasing for a while if there was another major media app coming to Windows 10. And then it was like, well, is it Apple? Because we did see, don't forget, Apple did have job descriptions to build the next gen of media apps for Windows. And they were looking for UWP experience. That was posted late last fall. So we are still expecting Apple to eventually launch some of its media. I'm hoping Apple TV would be pretty nice to have on Windows. So we're still expecting that, but it turns out it wasn't Apple, it was Amazon. They finally did their Prime Video app, which, the Amazon Prime Videos existed on Xbox. I use it all the time. It's a pretty good app. It gets the job done. It's got 4K, it's got HDR, right? Why they didn't just take that and recycle it for Windows 10, I'm not sure. They rewrote it. And listen, we're glad it's here. It's nice to have. The biggest thing is it supports offline viewing. So if you have an account, you can download the movies and take it with you on a flight, stuff like that. And that's really the point of it. But we did review, Sean Endicott did a review of it this week, and, pointing out the flaws too, which is it doesn't support 4K, it doesn't support HDR, and it doesn't support Dolby. It doesn't support picture-in-picture, the compact overlay feature that's part of Windows 10 and UWP. So yeah, we're glad it's here. It works well. It could be also much better, right? Netflix is still sort of, sets the bar for these apps on Windows 10. There's still room. Amazon can improve this stuff. It's not like technically they can't fix it or make it better over time. And maybe they will. Maybe they just want to get this version out the door. But I think it was healthy criticism, to see. Hopefully we'll see more from Amazon. Of course, people want to see a new Kindle app. It would be really nice to get. I still think they have time to do that. Like, as much as I want one for like my Pro X, I've already done an article talking about how you can use their web version. It's actually pretty solid. But I think as 10X comes onto the scene next year, and dual screen devices eventually, I think a push for a new Kindle app will become way more important. So they still have space there. Hopefully they're going to do something though. And then of course Amazon Music and stuff like that. But it's still nice to see another major UWP app land on Windows 10, right? In 2020. Like, it goes to show you that they saw something there. There's some reason why it convinced them to do it. So go check out Amazon Prime Video. It's okay.
I just watch Amazon Prime on my Xbox.
Yeah, same here. None of us are really traveling these days, right? So, but it's a nice option to have, especially in the United States. If you have movies anywhere, Amazon's part of that. So my entire library is on Amazon, just like it's also on Vudu and it's also on Microsoft. And technically Apple, although I have free Apple TV because I bought an iPhone 11, but I have no way to watch Apple TV because there's no Xbox app. So I'd like Apple to solve that. Maybe I'll be interested in Apple TV. Probably not. But technically it's free right now, and I haven't watched a single minute of it. So I go where the platforms are. So maybe Apple will fix that. All right, and we'll kind of round out the podcast this week. We'll talk about some hardware. So yeah, my NVX 360 review went up this week. So this is a new mid-range laptop. Starts at $650, which is pretty low. The version we reviewed is $800, $820 technically. This runs a new AMD Ryzen 4000 series processors, the new mobile ones, and they're really nice. They're fast, right? I tested the Ryzen 5, and it can almost be a Core i7 10th gen processor, which is pretty amazing, especially since it's cheaper, it's more affordable. But this device, it's a convertible laptop, supports touchscreen, obviously. There's a pen in the box. it's just a really good convertible PC that if you're on a budget, I think it's so good because I use obviously $1,000 and $2,000 laptops, right? So I'm, a baller in that sense. But I was able to use this laptop, and I was like, I could definitely use this all the time and not really care, not feel like I'm sacrificing anything. Sure, the SSD wasn't as fast. The thermals aren't as good as a premium laptop, right? So it does throttle after a while. But heck, for like $800, the display was fantastic. It goes up to almost 400 nits. You can even get the SureView one, which goes up to 1,000 nits of brightness. You can get it with a Ryzen 7. Costco has a deal right now, $750. And you get one with the Ryzen 7 processor, which that's going to be a Core i7 Intel easily. You get that for $750. Like, it's nice. It's nice to see. So, I've talked about AMD in the past. There's been a lot of hype around the Ryzen mobile series, the 4000s, because I've said the 3000s were not good. That's what was in Surface Laptop 3 15-inch. Not a very good processor. I visited AMD earlier this year in Austin, and for 2 days got to basically see what they've been working on and try out everything, get deep dives on how these chips worked. And there was a lot of hype there, and there's a lot of promises. And they're like, don't worry, you're going to get these devices. You'll see. Well, this was my first device with it. And, I'm glad to say that the hype has lived up. The AMD's delivered solid chips. And they still have challenges, though. As good as the AMD stuff is, we're not seeing it launch in those premium laptops. And some of that is because of Intel's influence. Intel, for one, knows AMD can beat them on pricing. So what does Intel do? They cut down on their pricing. This is the whole theory behind Surface Go using Pentium in the Core M3 versus going with ARM. So they cut these deals. They also offer better support. And also, Intel kind of co-develops some of these devices. I believe Dell's XPS line, they work closely with Intel. So, and Lenovo does the same too. We've said this before, the Yoga Book, the little 10-inch Intel one. You and I both had a device, and we're like, this would be cool, but it'd be cool with ARM. Like, why not? Turns out Intel kind of basically made that device or co-developed it with Lenovo. It was their concept device. So for Lenovo to take Intel's concept and go with ARM or AMD, I'm sure Intel would not be happy. But that is how that industry works. I hope to see more AMD in these higher end laptops though, because it'd be kind of cool. But things like Wi-Fi 6. The Wi-Fi 6 exists. You can actually get it in this NV laptop. It's extra, but you can get it. Thunderbolt 3 is still a challenge, I think. We haven't really seen any 4K laptops running these AMD chips, which I don't know why. So there are some of these questions, but I think there's a lot of potential with the AMD stuff. I'm very excited, and I want to see more OEMs sort of adopt them. That leads me to the XPS 17. So this is a new laptop. It's out now. I'll be reviewing it in a couple of weeks. I also have the Razer Blade Pro 17 I got to review. I have a lot of devices these days. But I'm actually more interested in the XPS 17 than I was in the XPS 15. I already reviewed the 15. You can go check it out on Windows Central. The 15 is fun, but it's also just a smaller version of what the 15-inch was last year, right? That's not to sidestep all the cool stuff about it. The 17, I was surprised because the 17 feels like using the old XPS 15. You're just getting a giant 17-inch display. And I posted some hands-on photos with it on Windows Central compared to the Surface Book 3 15-inch, and they're basically the same size. Wow. Now, the Surface Book is a little bit taller because it's a 3:2 aspect ratio, whereas the Dell is 16:10, so it's a little bit wider. But that's the only difference. So Surface Book's a little bit taller, the Dell is a little bit wider, but they're the same size otherwise. But that's incredible to have a 17-inch display and basically the size of a 15-inch laptop. The trackpad is huge. And I'm glad to say they did test it before they sent it to me. It's not a loose trackpad. It's actually a very good trackpad. It's got 4 speakers, 2 top firing, really nice keyboard, no number pad. And I hear you, number pad people. I know you're sad there's no number pad. I'm part of the other camp. I'm actually happy and glad there's no number. I hate number pads.
Me
I
too.
hate them. Hate them. And the reason I hate them is because it makes the trackpad and the keyboard off center. Like you're going to have to shift the keyboard over to the left and not be lined up with the center of the screen. And that just drives me nuts. Plus, I literally never use those keys. So I don't. And it's very rare to find a number pad laptop that also has top firing speakers. And that's what Dell, they were like, we want for this device to have top firing speakers as well as two in the bottom. We want to have really good audio for this. And you can't do top firing speakers and then put a full numpad on there, right? So sorry, there are other numpad laptops out there, but it's not this one. But the display is phenomenal. 4K, IGZO, touchscreen, 16:10 aspect ratio. It's got a very powerful, what I'm using is an 8-core Core i7. It's no joke for a processor. There's a Core i9 version coming out. And this one also has the RTX 2060 graphics card, Max-Q, of course. Now, there is a potential controversy, which I haven't been able to test, but I'll mention it now. This is the controversy. This laptop comes with a 130-watt charger. And this is going to sound very, very familiar to Surface Book owners. 130-watt charger, Type-C. Dell has a weird... They're the only company I know really that can make a 130-watt Type-C charger. Type-C caps at 100 watt. Theirs do 130 somehow. But that's the story. The problem appears to be that there's something wrong with the handshake when you plug it in the OS, and that charger actually only draws 100 watts from the outlet. And so I actually have... I bought a device that measures the draw. When you plug into the wall, I'll get a meter saying how much it actually is. But some people have said you'll see it only shows 100. And so the problem here, of course, is if you're using the XPS 17, and this is the alleged problem, I should say. When you're using the XPS 17, you throw the processor to max performance, and then you use it. That is, you're going to do something that's CPU and GPU intensive for a couple of hours, the battery will drain and won't while it's plugged in. That was an issue with Surface Book 2 as well. It's kind of a rare situation for some of us, but obviously for a lot of people buying this kind of laptop, it's not going to be that rare. That's the reason they're buying it. So Dell apparently hasn't been able to replicate it on their test devices, but this is what I'm going to try to figure out. So look for that early next week. I'm going to probably do a separate article on that to see what I find. That is one concern. This is sort of Dell's always had this kind of problem, which is every time they do a revision or a new device, the version 1 always tends to have some bugs with it that they solve in the later versions. And XPS 13 had this. Those had the XPS 13 and 15 both have had loose trackpad controversies years ago. I remember that because they sent me a review unit that had a loose trackpad, and I had to send it back. So that's Dell, right? I think a lot of companies have this. So it's not just Microsoft's fault, but I don't know. What do you think about the XPS 17? It's a pretty wild device, right?
I think it looks beautiful. I really like this form factor is what the Surface laptop should be aiming for, and they never will because Dell has it. Dell has perfected it, and anything that tries to copy it will look like an XPS. So and I think even Panos Panay likes the XPSs, the new ones. I've seen him liking tweets from Dell and stuff about the new XPS line.
Their displays
are amazing.
I'll keep saying it. Yeah, the Dell Sharp IGZO displays are the best displays on the market right now. In terms of they have the anti-reflective layer. They're like a cross between LCD and OLED. I think OLED looks cool, but as I said before, that it's too intense. It's just too much contrast. And when you stare at it for hours, it's just like, I know you can change it and all this kind of stuff, but it's just like, it's a little too much and it's worse for the battery. They've improved that. It's better now for the battery, but it is factually a thing that if you go with a laptop with an OLED display, it will get less battery life than a version with LCD.
Which is weird, right? Because on phones, it's the other way, right? Like having an OLED panel means, especially with dark mode, you actually get better battery life, right?
But the new display technology that was co-developed with Intel, they now have these 1 watt LCD displays.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
that's one reason why we've seen a lot of laptops get better battery life. They used to be 2 watt or 2.5 watts.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like a big difference, but when the display is on all the time when you're using it, it's just a constant draw. So if you can cut that in half, it saves battery life over time. And you do things like adaptive contrast, which a lot of people hate. It's not an auto brightness. This is when you open like a dark web page or a white one, and you see a shift in sort of brightness. That's done to be easier on your eyes, but it's also done to save battery life. A lot of people hate it. You can now disable it with the Intel control panel, but you combine all this stuff, it makes things interesting. But yeah, the XPS 17, it's just, I like it a lot so far. Like, I'm really having a blast using it. But I have other stuff I got to review first. I also have the Latitude 9510, which I got to work on. That's the new 15-inch business laptop that gets like 20 hours of battery life running Intel. It's sort of like the 7400 2-in-1 last year. It's just a little bit more premium. So that's pretty wild. I have another Latitude in a box here that I haven't even opened yet. I don't even know what it is. I have the Razer Blade Pro 17, and then I'm trying to think. Oh, and I have this MateBook I got to review too. So yeah, I got a lot of stuff. And Razer is going to continue to release 9,000 mice and keyboards for the foreseeable future. I'm actually using another new keyboard right now. Now, I'd show it to you, but it's under embargo, but I'm holding it. It's pretty cool. Look for that next week. So that does it for me, actually. I think I'm done talking.
I think that does it for the show. I don't think there's anything else to talk about. That's everything exciting that happened this week.
Is there anything exciting we should look forward to next week?
No, because I'm taking some days off.
Lucky. I need to do that.
I figured I should take a couple of days off now before the duo shows up, because it's going to be non-stop once the duo's here.
That is true. Even if I took time off, I'm not sure what I'd do. So
I just don't want to. I don't want to have to look at a screen for a few days. Yeah. That's the thing. Working from home means I have to be looking at a screen for 6 to 9 hours a day, whereas on a day off, even though I'm still at home, I don't have to look at that screen, and that makes me feel better.
I totally understand that. My goal this weekend is I got to really clean my office. It's just, I got 2 goals. I got to clean my office. It's just absurd right now. And I need to start selling my watches on eBay because
we've got to the point, have we, where it's time to start selling.
I got too many, and I need to consolidate. I bought my last watch that I'm buying for a long time because it's the most expensive one. Oh yeah. Totally worth it though. Yeah, most people spend years building up to their white whale watch. I did it in 3 months. So, but these are my goals for this weekend.
You know what you should do? Before you sell them, you should collect them all together, take a photo of all of them, and put it on Twitter. Say this is what you call an addiction. This is an addiction right here.
Yeah, it's probably And compared to, I think, listen, there's a level out there of watch nerd. There are people who wear 2 watches, one on each wrist, and they do that because they have so many watches. They feel bad of not one
not wearing them.
Yeah. So they have to wear one on the other wrist because they just enjoy them so much. Like, I understand that. I will never do that now. So there is a higher level to my insane collection that can be achieved. But other than that, I'm going to watch UFC this weekend, which I'm very excited about. There's a big UFC fight, 3 title fights online. So that's going to be my Saturday. But on that, we'll be back. Are we going to be back next week? We'll
be back next Friday. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. All right, everybody. We're going to now do Q&A. So if you have questions, start firing them off in comments. If you're listening to this recorded, of course, you don't get to hear that. Our apologies, but it'd just be too weird to do the recording. So you can join us on YouTube on our Windows Central channel every Fridays, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We can watch our live video. You can actually go back and watch the old videos too if you want to see those. And you can join our chat and ask us questions there. You can also follow me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino. or you can follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN and hit him up there for questions as well. Let us know what you think. Other than that, though, we'll see you next time. Stay safe, everyone.
Awesome. So all of those questions, let me check the hashtag.
Right.
One person, hashtag the struggle is real. Thanks. Okay, yes, if you've got questions, please do throw them in the chat. I see Sony reveal a PlayStation camera for the PlayStation 5 event. Is there a chance Microsoft is working on a slimmer Kinect for Series X? I wouldn't be surprised if there is something, but we don't know of anything. There was a rumor ages ago that Microsoft were working on some webcam peripherals. None of them have showed up. So perhaps that's what that rumor was referring to, but as of right, I have not heard anything from any of my sources.
It is weird that, I mean, it's not weird. If you talk, like Phil, Spencer there, he's just very focused on the core experience of a game. And I get that. I still feel like they could do both. And it is weird that they're sitting on, this technology from Kinect went to HoloLens and went to Windows Hello. Like, can it come back into Xbox? Because it seems like it could be some interesting uses for it. But yeah, are they going to be like, hey, developers, you can now use new APIs and make your games do this? And developers are like, cool, and then not do it. We just have the same problems before. Because that's what killed it before, right? There was not a lot of games used it. And so why?
Did you try to see if xCloud works on the dual display on Duo? I did not try that. But I believe it will. Did you guys ever have an early look at the upcoming Xbox Series X hardware, controllers, or even packaging? We did not. I believe a YouTuber or a couple of YouTubers did, but I don't think any, maybe even Eurogamer or Digital Foundry, one of them definitely had hands-on, but we did not, unfortunately. Why is there a distinction in Xbox hardware and Surface hardware? Because they serve different markets. It would be weird... It would be dangerous, rather, to have them under one roof. Although they are designed, but the Microsoft Devices is the team that handles Xbox hardware and Surface hardware. But they have different groups, obviously, handling the Xbox side and the Surface side, because that's how you get the best products, right? Otherwise, you'd have people who design PCs trying to design a console, and they'd be like, well, why don't we add this? Why don't we... And that's how Kinect happens. People from other parts of the company go, we should have this in this console.
Someone's asked about the notifications on Duo being only on the right-hand side, but what about happens when you're using the camera, which I don't really understand. I mean, you can on Android as it is now, like notifications come in over the top of the camera. Like, yeah. I imagine it's the same thing.
I think what he's asking is if you're using the camera, because to use the camera, you have to fold it 360 degrees. So one of the screens is behind, then the camera's facing the world. Where will the notification come through? And in that scenario, it will come through on the left screen, or it will come on the screen that you're using, unless you're using both screens at once, in which case it will come in on the right display. I should have clarified that in the video. You are right. But if you're using it in single screen mode and you're on the left screen, the notifications will come in on the left screen.
Got it. Yep. Am I sad for thinking the ideal use for dual screen would be reading comics? No, I think any kind of reading, it makes sense. And you'll see that with like the news app and stuff like that, the way they're going to be presenting news stories and the flow of the formatting and stuff like that. So,
is Duo straining the Microsoft / Samsung partnership? I don't think so. In fact, I think their partnership's going pretty well. I think there was a leak this week or last week which says the Galaxy Watch 3 will have Outlook as the only email client pre-installed. The Samsung email is going away on the watch. So that's pretty big
Why
news.
would Samsung be worried? Like, there's no chance Duo is going to outsell any Galaxy device.
Yeah.
Like, Microsoft doesn't believe that. None of you believe that. Samsung doesn't believe that. They're just like, okay, Microsoft wants to put out basically a concept device that drives innovation, this idea around dual screens, which would only benefit Samsung because they're doing dual screen stuff too. And so more devices out there means more developers making apps that leverage dual screens. Samsung will benefit from that. So When will Windows Store be updated? Never. I don't know. There's no Windows Store team apparently, so that may change. Maybe Panos will reform a team, be like, we got to fix the store, but we sure as heck haven't heard anything.
Guesstimates on the Duo's price: $12.50.
$9.99 for the entry level.
That's an optimistic guess.
And it's a complete guess.
Yes, no, I'm saying, but mine's a complete guess as well.
Do you think Microsoft will begin automatically packing popular sites as PWAs and listing them in the store?
That was originally the plan.
But
then it stopped.
Well, the problem is that plan was announced when we just had Edge HTML, the old Edge version. And that's what powers the PWAs in the store. That's changing. So now you have a new browser that's Chromium based, which hasn't rolled out to everyone. You can install it if you want to, but it hasn't been forced through the Windows Update yet. When they get there, when that gets pushed out and it's basically on all devices, which is probably another 6 months at least, and they update the WebView 2 for the store and for developers, which will give them the option to do this, they can then go forward. Because right now, you don't want to release PWAs, which are based on Edge HTML, because then, like, if you were to ever remove Edge HTML from Windows, it would break all those and developers would be upset. And it's not a great experience. Like, Edge HTML PWAs work. The Chromium-based HTML and PWAs work better. It's just they're faster, use less battery, and all this kind of stuff. It's where that stuff is going. So I think that plan's been put on hold. But PWAs, they're still growing. It's just it's going to take years for that stuff to kind of catch on.
Yeah. Will the Duo be able to swap which screen has the keyboard in laptop mode so the front-facing camera can be used as a webcam? Yes. Just turn it the way so the top screen is the one where the camera is. That mode is just based entirely on which way you turn the screen. You can turn it, if you're holding it with two screens, in the standard way, you turn it that way, then the camera will be on top. If you turn it that way, then the camera will be on the bottom. Someone's asking here, Lumia's never sold well, but they still sold millions. How can it be okay for Surface Duo to only sell like 5,000? Doesn't really add up to me. Well, I'm not saying that's Microsoft's goal. That was just an example. But even if it was only 5,000, the difference is that it runs Android. The reason it was important for Lumia's to sell millions is because it ran Windows and it needed numbers so that developers would be convinced to build apps for it. Surface Duo sells only 5,000. That doesn't matter for the app selection because Android already has apps, and Surface Duo only selling 5,000 means nothing other than developers won't adapt to the dual screen setup, which is fine because Surface Duo can still use those apps without any issue. It's not a huge problem that those apps don't adapt to dual screen. Some of them will, and maybe Microsoft is even working closely with some big app names to add dual screen support. But I think the real goal for the Surface Duo is to push the form factor and get other OEMs to build similar devices so that developers do adapt to that dual screen setup, and then Duo benefits from that in the long run as well.
Someone's asking if I had any problems with Hibernate. No. Although the new Windows 10 on ARM Flex 5G from Lenovo doesn't hibernate, which I thought was interesting. I don't know why that is. No, I haven't had any problems. And plus, you didn't mention which laptop you're having problems on, so I can't really say anything specific. But although I will say, my desktop doesn't hibernate. So it used to. It doesn't now. I put it to sleep, and then it'll eventually just kind of wake up on its own.
It's got a bad sleep cycle.
Know why. Yeah. So that's kind of annoying. So there's probably some truth to that. There's probably something with the Hibernate stuff that's not working well. It's true.
How does Duo determine which side you're using the single screen mode on? I believe it uses gyroscopes, but I don't know if that works in all scenarios. I think the other way you can do it is by double tapping on the screen you're not using, and it will just bring everything to the other side. Either that or you can't, and it will take you to turn around to the other screen, which I don't think is how that works.
The camera is always on, and there's a dedicated employee at Microsoft for your phone, and he just sees.
He just looks at
he
you.
Or she. Yeah, if you're looking at the screen and which one, and they switch. It's not a very efficient process, but
Yeah,
It's
all of
very
those
customized.
mobile employees they just hired. That's for that team,
Yeah,
just to
that's
watch
what
you.
that does. Yeah. As going back to the PWA thing, yeah. I mean, when Chromium version is built into Windows 10, they may start doing that stuff again. I think, but right now, as far as I know, it's that program has been put on hold indefinitely until they get to that stage. But you'll hear more about this when 10x, I think, becomes, you know, closer to hitting the scene.
Do you think Duo 2 will come sooner rather than later? If you had to guess, would you expect it next year, maybe? If I had to guess, I'd say end of next year, fall 2021. I think what Microsoft is. Yeah, I think that would be a good time to announce it.
What are your favorite TV series and movies these days? I'm trying to get through Dark on Netflix. The show is a slog, man. I mean, I know people like it, but it's just one of those shows. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on. Um, I don't like really any characters. It's always raining, which makes me sad. It's very dark. It's very German. Yeah, so trying to
Um,
get through that.
what have I been watching? So I'm actually looking forward to The Boys season 2 on Amazon Prime. I liked the first
Yes,
season. That was very
yeah,
good.
that's a great show. Yeah.
Yeah. I also watched recently a Touch of Cloth, which is a funny. It's like a spoof on the detective show. There's only 6 episodes, and it's very adult, so don't be watching it if you're a child. But it's hilarious. I laughed the whole way through. It was really funny. Um, there was a question here that just the Surface Neo page still says holiday 2020. Do you believe that? I do not. In fact, I can say with almost 100% certainty that the Surface Neo is not coming this year.
Did War of the Worlds season 2 come out now? I don't know when that's coming. I don't know if that they shot that, if they're shooting it. I don't think we'll probably see that till 2021. I think the whole pandemic thing kind of threw everything off. Yeah, The Old Guard on Netflix comes out today. I'll probably check that out. But yeah. With the new permissions in Apple iOS, is there more chance for your phone app to be available for iPhone? I don't see those two things as connected at all. What they're referring to is it's kind of annoying, but it's kind of iOS 14 is very aggressive in letting you know what apps are doing what in the background, accessing internet. So every time you open, even when you upgrade to iOS 14 and you open up apps that you've been running forever, it's going to ask you new permissions like, hey, this thing's accessing the internet. Do you want to? So there's a lot more of that kind of going on. Android has been doing this a lot too. It's I'm not criticizing. It's an annoying approach, but it's sort of the right approach. The thing with your phone, because iOS doesn't really work with your phone. It works in like a very rudimentary. I forgot what it actually does work with. But that's a separate issue. That has to do with Apple not opening any of its APIs to Microsoft to make that happen. That's on Apple 100%. Microsoft has approached Apple, from what I understand. They've tried to get them to agree to this, but Apple doesn't seem to be interested, which is probably not surprising. We've talked about this in the past, how Dell does it. They kind of force it, and they have a third-party company called Screenovate, and they do that. You have to install a driver to make it happen. And all. It's a brute force way. It works, but it's not the approach Microsoft wants to do. They would rather have, cooperation from Apple.
Do you think Duo?
Microsoft offering a discount on Duo version 2 for the no? I don't see that.
I think what he's referring to is like trade-in, like how Samsung and iPhone do trade-ins. I don't think so for the Surface.
I don't think so.
Although in the US, I think don't they do it? Doesn't the US Microsoft still have a trade-in program now?
They did. They do. I don't know. I haven't really followed that, but
if they do, then I'm sure there will be something. I don't think it'll be a lot though.
Yeah, not like Apple. Apple still does it the best.
Yeah. Even on Samsung. Samsung gives you a lot of money for your old phone. You can always get like half price off sometimes. Jesus, Samsung, what do you want with my old phone? They recycle it and turn it into a new phone, I think.
With Apple finally allowing you to set third-party defaults, do you think Microsoft will start investing more in feature parity between Android and iOS apps? I don't understand. If anything, I would argue the iOS apps are better than
Already,
Android.
yeah. If anything, it's going to get worse for Android.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't really. I mean, Outlook is already one of the top apps on iOS, and you should be able to set it soon as a default one. Same with Edge. So I don't know. They are different teams, and they operate on sort of different schedules, and that needs to sort of hopefully get aligned. So the Android Outlook app definitely does get features before the iOS one. And sometimes it's reverse. For instance, the Play My Email feature that's available in iOS right now. It's still not here for Android. So it works both ways.
Do you think Surface Pro 8 and Neo launch around the same time in 2021? I think we might see a Surface Pro 8 later this year in 2020, assuming Microsoft follows the same release cycle they have done for the last few years. Surface Pro usually launches in the fall of the year. So I think we might see a Pro 8 later this year. Neo, I would expect at the earliest late 2021. A few more questions, I think. My Surface Pro keyboard has one piece of fabric around the trackpad that came loose and is causing phantom touches. I was looking into replacing it, but maybe I was thinking waiting for the Surface Pro 8. Well, it depends, right? Because if the Pro 8 is a redesign, then the keyboard for the Pro 8 might be updated. I was going to say just get a new keyboard today, and then you can get the Pro 8 and the 4 and then just put the keyboard you get today on the Pro 8. But if the Pro 8 is changing its design, and you can't do that because the Pro 7 type covers aren't compatible with the Pro X, right? So that is a sticky situation. Maybe, yeah, maybe just shell out for the new type cover, and if they change it, oh well. When do you think we will see a new Pro X, considering we haven't seen a new Qualcomm chip from Windows devices in a while? Could we still see an SQ2 from Microsoft regardless? I think an SQ2 would have to be based on some kind of newer 8CX. And there is rumours of an 8CX Plus on the way, so that could be an SQ2 for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's, yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that's, I wouldn't consider that a new chip. It just sounds like...
Me neither.
But I could see them doing a Pro X with a faster chip. Yeah, I mean, but they probably, I imagine, tie that in with the idea of the 64-bit emulation that's rumored to be coming. I could see that all kind of coming together, maybe. But yeah, we haven't heard anything.
It would be cool to have a crossover of you and Thora and Sam's. Have you guys ever considered any collabs with other Microsoft pundits for a full episode? The problem with crossovers, they have happened. Like me and Mary Jo did an episode of the Windows Central podcast. But the problem with collaborations is that everyone's schedules needs to line up for it. But not only that, we need to have those schedules line up at a time where there's actual stuff to talk about. Usually when it comes to Build and Ignite, we're actually at the events. We can't do that because we're all around different places and stuff. And this year would be a good year to do it, really, because we're all at home and stuff. But even then, get people's schedules lining up and stuff, it just doesn't always work out like that. But no, Doug, I wouldn't say no if people were to offer to do a collab episode. In the end of June this year, news came to the internet that Google was seeking Microsoft's help on Flutter apps. Any updates? I didn't know that. I didn't even know that. So, no updates for me. All right, if you got any more questions, now is the time because we're about to sign off. Get them in.
I think we're done.
What are your thoughts on the new Xbox Series pricing? Should we expect Xbox One X price for the Series X and Xbox One S price for Lockhart? Probably something like that, right? I think the Series X will probably be $499, and the Series X will be $499, and the Series S will be probably $399 or $299. Is fluid design still a thing in Windows 10X? Yes.
They're going back to Metro.
They're going back to Windows 95 where it was just grey all the time.
Yeah. Headphones with mic for Xbox, maybe. There is a rumor. I think it's obviously Bang & Olufsen is involved. I think there's probably safe to say that there's a special headphone coming out, but that's all we know.
Will you consider Facebook streaming? No. I really don't want to stream to Facebook. One, I don't like Facebook at all. And two, streaming to Mixer as a second platform was a nightmare just from a production standpoint. And I really don't want to have to do that again. Twitch streaming, also no. We don't have a following on Twitch. There's no point. It'd just be only a few people listening. And will Lockhart be a cloud emulator only device? No, Lockhart will play games natively. It will be just as powerful as a Series X from a CPU perspective, I believe. I think it's just the GPU that's less powerful. So essentially, think of Lockhart as a Series X, but designed for people who don't have 4K televisions. For those people who are still running 1080p monitors and TVs, Lockhart's a great choice because you still get the same power in regards to technical processing and whatnot. You just don't get the graphical fidelity or the graphical enhancements that Series X provides because it doesn't have a graphics card powerful enough to provide 4K 60. But it can do 1080p just fine. And I'm sure that's going to look great as well. I think that's it. I think that's good. We're good for now.
Sounds good. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hang on, I don't know what's going on. My program's crashing. I can't stop the broadcast. That's hilarious. All right, bye, everyone.